Every Monday at exactly 9 in the morning, just as the world outside my window was beginning its noisy journey, I, still smelling of night dreams and bitter coffee, would perform the same ritual. I would open the banking app, and $700 would set off as a silent electronic caravan to a quiet town 30 minutes away from my home. This was not an act of generosity, not a manifestation of a daughter's love. It was my quiet, desperate way of preserving a fragile, illusory world, a costly pretense that the crack that had split our family wasn't so deep, that we were still connected by invisible yet sturdy threads. Before we continue, I'm very curious. What country are you from, dear listeners? Write in the comments where you're listening from. And now we continue. I gave this money as if paying a tribute for my own existence, for the right to breathe air they perhaps deemed unsuitable for me. Perhaps, deep down, a naive hope smoldered that if I kept giving, weekly sacrificing a piece of my peace and night labor, they would one day see through their righteous anger not a daughter who had disappointed them, not a mistake of youth, but simply a person. A woman who works to exhaustion after night shifts, sitting at the kitchen table where, next to a stack of bills, Brooke's drawings hang like bright spots of joy. I would enter the same digits with a cold stone in my heart, watching as the soulless notification flashed on the screen. Payment sent. It was a kind of pulse, proof that I was still alive in their coordinate system, even if as an anonymous benefactor. My mother never thanked me. My father never mentioned it in any of our rare, strained conversations. But when their car broke down, I silently paid the mechanic. When a threat to disconnect the electricity came, I paid off the debt before they even dared to call. This wasn't charity. It was a survival tactic. Preserving their peace meant preserving a shaky truce in my own soul. Brooke, my 6-year-old ray of sunshine, of course, understood nothing. She thought her grandparents lived in a magical, unimaginably distant land, not half an hour away by highway. "Mommy, will they come to my dance recital?" she would ask, twirling around the living room in her new, dazzlingly shiny tutu. And I, making an incredible effort, would smile, swallowing a lump of bitter truth, and say, "Maybe next time, sweetie." She would nod, her clear eyes shining with unconditional faith. Children always believe. I, too, once believed. Believed that a parent's heart couldn't turn to stone forever, that pride would eventually run dry, and love, like a stubborn sprout, would find its way through the thickest asphalt slabs of misunderstanding. I even allowed myself to paint a touching picture in my imagination. They were sitting again at this very kitchen table, their hands veined with years, gently holding Brooke's small, trusting palms. And they were telling her funny stories about what I was like at her age. But every call from my mother mercilessly reminded me how far we had gone in this cold farce. Her voice on the phone sounded with the same impersonal clarity with which she must have spoken to subordinates in her office. "Don't forget to add groceries this week," she would enunciate. "Father is running out of his cholesterol pills." Not a single warm word, no questions about Brooke, no hint that on the other end of the line was her daughter. I was merely a function, a living reminder of a once-made mistake. Sometimes in the evenings, passing by Brooke's room, I would hear her quiet, trusting murmurs. She would arrange her dolls in a circle, giving them names. "This is Grandma, this is Grandpa, this is Mommy," and make them hug, laugh, share imaginary cookies. My heart would clench with an aching pain in those moments. My child, in the silence of her room, was building from plush and porcelain the very family, the very warmth she was denied in reality. She was constructing the love she desperately dreamed of. That is why, when her birthday approached, I, gritting my teeth, decided to throw a real party. The yard was bright with streamers and balloons, the table was groaning with treats, and a cheap inflatable castle, found by me on an online flea market, rose in the middle of the lawn as a symbol of my desperate effort. Brooke, with her hair braided in intricate Elsa princess braids, was radiant with anticipation. "What do you think, Mommy? Will they come this time?" she whispered, clutching the bars of the garden fence and peering into the distance from where the guests were supposed to appear. I paused, forcing my lips to stretch into a semblance of a smile. "Maybe, baby, let's wait a little longer. But deep down, in that place where cold clarity lived, I already understood everything. By 3 p.m, the birthday candles on the cake had melted into soft pink puddles. The lemonade had warmed under the scorching sun, and although the sweet smell of sugar icing and children's sunscreen still lingered in the yard, the cheerful din gradually subsided. Brooke kept glancing furtively at the gate, her fingers sticky from treats, sunbeams dancing on the hem of her new dress. "Mommy, do you think Grandma and Grandpa are here yet?" she asked, quieter and quieter, wilting more with each time. I smiled that particular strained smile that comes to mothers when they are powerless to correct someone else's cruelty. "Maybe, sweetheart. Traffic." But there was no traffic. No call, no excuse, just a deafening, humiliating silence. I continued to lead this carnival of loneliness even after the last guests had left. Brooke sat on the porch steps clutching a half-eaten cupcake in her hand, her shiny shoes dangling limply in the air. She stared at the road with such intense hope, as if faith alone could materialize the long-desired car there. When the sun finally disappeared, staining the sky crimson, she whispered, "Maybe they just forgot." I knelt before her, brushed the unruly strands from her damp forehead, and, trying to keep my voice from trembling, replied, "Maybe." And then, swallowing the lump rising in my throat, added, "But we still had fun, right?" She just nodded, tired, her long eyelashes heavy with encroaching drowsiness. That evening, after putting her to bed and soothing her to sleep, I remained sitting in the living room, silence, scrolling through photos from the party. In every picture, her smile beamed, with balloons and laughing friends in the background. Each frame was silent testimony to my attempts, my struggle for her happiness. And then, scrolling to the next picture, I saw it. Mom had sent me a message that morning. It had arrived while we were already cleaning up the party remnants. "Wish Brooke a happy birthday from us." And that was all. No warm call, no visit, not even a period at the end of that dry, official sentence. I stared for a long time at the cold light of the screen, which reflected my stunned face, and then, obeying some deep, daughterly impulse, dialed the number. I didn't even know why. Maybe, deep down, I still hoped to hear some explanation, even the most pathetic, saving lie, something remotely resembling love. Dad answered. His voice sounded sharp and irritated, as if I had torn him away from something extremely important. "What is it, Jessica?" he barked into the phone. "Why didn't you come today?" I asked, and my own voice sounded foreign, thin, and defenseless. A pause followed, and then a heavy sigh full of undisguised contempt. "We didn't want to." "Dad," I whispered, feeling my legs go weak, "Brooke was waiting for you. She made a card for you." Another pause, more drawn out and oppressive. And then came the one phrase that split my familiar world in two, like a hammer blow to crystal. "Your child means nothing to us." For a while, I heard nothing but the steady, humiliating dial tone and the deafening rush of my own blood in my temples. My body turned cold and numb before my mind could grasp the full monstrosity of what had been said. "What did you just say?" I squeezed out. But he didn't repeat it. He simply hung up. I sat there, pressing the silent receiver to my ear, staring into the void on the opposite wall, unable to move. I didn't cry, didn't scream, just froze, turning into an icy statue of my own grief. Behind me, on the refrigerator, Brooke's drawings swayed cheerfully in the draft, her naive little hearts and smiling stick figures living in a happy world that didn't exist and never would. My hands started to shake. As if in a dream, I flipped the phone over, placed it on the kitchen counter, and whispered into the tomb-like silence to no one in particular. "Okay." This silence now seemed heavier than any sorrow, dense and tangible, like lead. I got up and went to Brooke's room. She was asleep, her hair tousled on the pillow, her cheek still holding a childlike, festive blush. I knelt beside her bed and, trying to breathe evenly, kissed her warm, velvety forehead. "You are everything," I whispered, feeling hot, scalding tears finally flow down my cheeks, even if they can't see it. Back in the kitchen, I glanced mechanically at the clock. 9:07 p.m. This was the time I usually checked if the weekly payment had gone through. The habit, ingrained in my subconscious, made my thumb hover involuntarily over the banking app icon. But I stopped. Not this time. I poured the remains of the warm lemonade down the sink, wiped the countertop thoroughly, and froze in the center of this suddenly alien kitchen, with absolute clarity understanding that after today, something within me would change irrevocably. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. I just sat at the kitchen table, watching the clock hands slowly pass midnight, and played his words over and over in my head like a broken record. Your child means nothing to us. They didn't echo. They etched themselves into my memory, each syllable like a sharp, merciless blade, leaving ragged, unhealing wounds. The phone still lay on the counter where I had left it. My reflection flickered faintly in its dark, lifeless screen. Disheveled hair, tearful, swollen eyes. I barely recognized in that exhausted face the woman who just that morning had naively believed in the possibility of reconciliation. I reached for the phone, not to call them again in a futile hope of being heard. No. My aim was to put an end to it. To put an end to this humiliating, years-long war where the only white flag had been regular money transfers. For years, I had been buying this fragile, illusory world, paying a weekly tribute for it. Every Monday at 9 a.m., I ritually transformed my guilt, my longing for acceptance, into cold, faceless currency. Now it had dawned on me with agonizing clarity. I no longer needed to buy a forgiveness that had never existed in their hearts. I opened the banking app. My fingers, which remembered every password, now betrayed me by trembling as they slid over the screen with the list of my monthly obligations. Rent, groceries, utilities, insurance, line by line, all on me, all my responsibility. I stared at this digital martyrology and then began methodically, with icy calm, to delete one automatic payment after another. It was like cutting invisible strings that had been pulling me, a will-less puppet all these years. A click, cancel, confirm. With every movement of my finger, with every disappearing reminder of the past, my rapidly beating heart began to stabilize. The trembling in my hands gradually subsided, replaced by an unfamiliar firmness. And then I reached the last line, that very automatic transfer of $700 scheduled for the coming Monday. I froze for a moment, feeling a strange, almost weightless calm. Then I pressed delete. And so, in an instant, an 8-month habit, a whole era of self-abasement, vanished without a trace into the digital abyss. For a while, a tomb-like silence reigned in the kitchen, broken only by the obsessive hum of the refrigerator and the creaking of old pipes. The night pressed against the window panes, dark and silent. And in this silence, my phone vibrated sharply. A message from Mom. "Can you order us dinner? Nothing fancy, just Chinese food or something. We have no food in the house at all." I stared at these words, feeling my mouth go dry. 40 minutes. That's how long it took them to notice the disappearance of the financial lifeline. 40 minutes after they had erased my daughter from their world with a single monstrous sentence. My thumb instinctively hovered over the screen. I could have typed anything, a bitter reproach, a final word, an explanation. But I didn't. I simply locked the screen and turned the phone face down, as if covering an entire era with a shroud. Instead, I got up and went to Brooke's room. She was snoring softly, curled up under the blanket, her small hand tightly clutching the paw of a stuffed rabbit named Hope. I sat on the edge of her bed, brushed the tangled, silky strands from her forehead, and whispered into the semi-darkness, "Never again." It was a promise not to her, but to myself. And in that very moment, the last remnants of the oppressive, consuming guilt inside me finally died out. I realized with absolute, crystalline clarity, I owe them nothing. Not money, not explanations, not a shred of my peace of mind. My silence in response to their request was more eloquent than any confrontation. When I finally rose from my knees to leave the room, the air in the house seemed cleaner, and lighter. The weight that had lain on my chest like an invisible stone for years had finally dissolved. I clicked the switch in the hallway, watching the house sink into pure, healing darkness. Some betrayals don't require loud scandals and confrontations. They only require quiet but final burials. And that night, I buried that last naive part of me that still believed family was a synonym for love. The morning after that fateful call, the sunlight streamed brazenly and carefreely onto the kitchen table, as if nothing had happened in the world. But I couldn't shake off the icy echo of his voice. "Your child means nothing to us." The phrase reverberated in every tick of the clock, in the steady hum of the refrigerator, in the very rhythm of my breathing. Brooke was still asleep, and I made coffee just to warm my chilled fingers, to have something to hold to keep my hands from shaking. Suddenly the phone rang, an unknown number. For a second I wanted to ignore it, but some vague premonition made me answer. "Miss Hayes, this is Richard, your parents' landlord." The voice on the other end was polite, but puzzled. "I just wanted to check. The rent hasn't come through, which is unlike you." Unlike you. Those words stung. They denoted the old, responsible version of me that no longer existed. "That is no longer my responsibility," I said, and my own voice sounded foreign. "They will have to deal with it themselves." He hesitated. "But they told me you managed their payments." "I used to," my tone even and steady, surprised even me. "Not anymore." When I hung up, I felt something inside finally click and snap, as if the last connecting thread had broken. I was no longer their insurance policy, their financial support. I was simply a person drinking cooled coffee in the silence of my own home. At exactly 10, my brother called. "Jess," he began without preamble, "Mom says you've lost your mind." I laughed quietly, soundlessly. "And what does losing your mind look like to you?" "You've cut them off," he stated. "Me?" Bitterness rang in my voice. They were the first to cut the rope. Ryan was silent for a few moments, then said, "Okay, I'm ending it too." I blinked in confusion. "What?" "I've been sending them money too," he admitted. "Not as much as you, a few hundred a month, for groceries, gas, small things." His voice trembled. "I thought if we both helped, they would change." "They never told me," I whispered, feeling my legs go weak. "They never told me about you either," he replied. "Seems we were paying for the same guilt." I sank onto a chair, clutching the hot mug in my hands. "So they lied to both of us?" "Yes," his voice regained firmness, "but this time we've stopped. You did the right thing, Jess." Before I could answer, another notification popped up on my phone, this time from Facebook. A live stream from my mother titled, "The Truth About Our Daughter." Just the title made me go cold inside. "Oh, God," escaped my lips. "Don't watch it," Ryan said quickly. But I was already clicking on the thumbnail. On the screen was my mother, theatrically clutching a handkerchief in her hand, like an actress caught in the middle of a dramatic monologue. Next to her, my father sat with his arms sternly crossed. Mom sniffled. "We always supported Jessica in everything, but she has been telling people that we are monsters who refuse to see her child. None of that is true." Dad leaned closer to the camera, his face contorted in a grimace of righteous anger. "She has been extorting money from us for years. She needs help." I didn't blink, didn't breathe, watching this performance, feeling a freezing numbness growing inside me, until the very moment I had been unconsciously waiting for arrived. My father, with theatrical pathos, held up a printed photograph of Brooke in front of the camera, the one where she was beaming in her pink party dress, and uttered the same words, but now not into an indifferent telephone receiver, but to the whole world. "This child does not exist for us." I froze at the screen, and memories pierced through me in a piercing wave. Her carefree laughter in the park, her little hands clapping over the lit candles. It all flashed through my mind like burning film, leaving only ashes behind. I couldn't watch to the end, turning off the video with a feeling of physical violation. For the next hour, my phone was blowing up with messages. "Did you see this? Is that your father?" Comments were accumulating under the post, a bizarre mix of genuine sympathy and venomous condemnation. Who could say such a thing about a 6-year-old child? She must have done something to drive them to this. Praying for their hardened hearts. If this is true, it's disgusting. I turned off my phone, and an oppressive silence fell in the house, in which even the air seemed afraid to move. Later, Ryan wrote, "Don't post anything in response. Let them choke on their own words." I obeyed. This silence on my part turned out to be more eloquent than any scream. By evening, the video had spread all over our small town. Their church friends shared it with prayer emojis, while others commented indignantly, "What kind of grandparents talk like that? The situation is clearly not what they're presenting it as." The next morning, a new message came from Richard. "They have been given 30 days' notice to vacate. I'm sorry it came to this." I didn't respond. I didn't need his pity. For the first time in a long time, I felt that justice, however small, had been served. 2 days later, I got a call from my cousin Lauren. Her voice trembled with indignation. "They're here at the family gathering. Can you believe it?" I frowned, but they weren't invited. "They showed up uninvited, trying to garner sympathy," Lauren exhaled. "Jess, I can't pretend anymore. You should check Facebook later." And she hung up. An hour later, I followed her advice. A new video filmed on someone's phone was already gaining traction. The grainy camera captured a sunny backyard set with picnic tables. My parents stood in the center, and Mom, gesticulating emphatically, was addressing the relatives. "Whatever Jessica has told you, we have always loved her. And that poor child, she's just confused." And then, sharply and clearly, Lauren's voice rang out. "Before or after you said her child doesn't exist for you?" The camera turned to her. She was holding her phone, and from its small speaker, that unmistakable, incomparable voice of my father blared for all to hear. "Your child means nothing to us." Gasps followed, a collective intake of breath. My mother froze with her mouth open, and my father's face turned white. The entire yard fell into a deafening silence, broken only by the distant buzzing of a lawnmower. Then Uncle James, a man of few words and respected, slowly rose from his seat. His voice, calm but brooking no argument, carried that very note of righteous anger that can shut down any lie. "If that's how you feel about your own flesh and blood, your own granddaughter, then you don't belong here." No one stood up for them. No one rushed to comfort them. A heavy, stern silence fell, becoming both their judgment and their sentence. They left without a word, with pale, drawn faces, unable to lift their eyes to meet the relatives whose gazes burned their backs. The camera switched back to Lauren. Someone in the background muttered with relief, "Well done." Another voice, elderly and trembling, added, "It was about time." I rewatched that short clip 3 times, then put the phone aside and laughed, a quiet, trembling laugh of relief coming from the very depths of my liberated chest. It wasn't gloating. It was a final, irrevocable liberation. Ryan called that same evening. "Did you see?" he asked without preamble. "I saw," I replied. "They destroyed themselves." "Finally," he said quietly, "and you didn't even have to lift a finger." "Sometimes the truth doesn't need an advocate," he murmured. "It manages on its own." That night, I sat by Brooke's bed, listening to her even breathing and watching her fingers clutch the stuffed rabbit's paw. For the first time in many months, there was no familiar aching pain in my chest. I listened to the rare rain tapping against the window panes and thought of every Monday morning spent, every sum I had paid for the ghostly hope of a love that never existed. I opened my laptop, not to prove anything to anyone, but to look at the bank transaction history one last time. 8 months of payments, line after line, confirmation after confirmation. I scrolled to the very end and whispered, "No reproach, no regret." The case was closed. The next morning, the headlines in our local Facebook group were merciless. "Churchgoers caught renouncing granddaughter." Someone had edited both videos into one damning clip, their own live stream and the humiliating scene at the family gathering. The comments were ruthless. Hypocrisy in its purest form. Blood can't be erased with words. Poor girl. By noon, their church had quietly removed their photos from the parish website. The landlord changed the locks. Their few defenders hastily retreated. I posted nothing. I didn't celebrate. I simply took Brooke to the park. She was drawing huge, crooked stars on the asphalt with chalk and saying, "Mommy, this one is for Uncle Ryan." The air smelled of impending rain and chalk dust. She laughed gleefully, and the sound was so pure and carefree that my heart clenched now with happiness. When we returned home, I found an envelope of thick, cream-colored paper in the mailbox. My name was written on it in a neat, old-fashioned hand. In a short note, Aunt Virginia had written just a few words. "They chose pride. You chose your child. That is what real families should look like." I folded the paper and put it in a desk drawer. Some victories don't require applause. They just quietly and forever change your life for the better. That night, tucking Brooke in and smoothing her blanket, I heard her sleepy, thoughtful question from the semi-darkness. "Mommy, can Grandma and Grandpa come next year?" I froze for a moment, feeling the familiar lie of maybe stick in my throat, giving way to the bitter but necessary truth. "No, baby," I said quietly but very clearly. "They won't be coming anymore." She nodded thoughtfully, accepting this verdict with astounding childlike wisdom, and simply said, "That's okay. We can invite Uncle Ryan instead." I couldn't help but smile, brushing the unruly strands from her damp forehead. "Yes, darling, that sounds perfect." When I turned off the light, the room was plunged into silence. But this time it wasn't frightening or lonely. It was filled with peace and well-earned quiet, the kind that is born only after a long and exhausting battle. The following week, life became noticeably quieter, as if the whole world around had finally exhaled, released from tension. The endless calls, messages, the poisonous noise of others' opinions, all of it dissolved into the steady, background hum of everyday life. My parents vanished without a trace from social media, their profiles deleted, and their church published an evasive statement about family healing that everyone understood correctly. I didn't feel like a victor. I felt a weightless, hitherto unfamiliar freedom, the kind that is in no hurry and simply sits with you at breakfast, allowing you to breathe fully. Brooke was humming to herself, smearing strawberry jam on her toast, completely unaware that the storm that had raged over our heads for so long had finally subsided. That weekend, Ryan dropped by with bags full of groceries, and in his eyes, for the first time in a long while, I saw not anxiety, but calm. "You look lighter," he remarked. "Maybe," I replied, and in that maybe, there was not a trace of the old bitterness. On Sunday, we drove to Aunt Virginia's for lunch, where the dining room smelled of cooling lemon pie and sunlight fell on the floor in intricate patterns through the lace curtains. First, she hugged Brooke tightly, then me, and whispered in my ear, "Peace suits you, Jessica." Over lunch, she spoke about boundaries, about how love without respect is not love at all, and for the first time, I didn't just listen, but truly heard these words, and for the first time in my life, I believed in their truth unconditionally. Later, while Brooke was busily coloring another masterpiece on the table, Aunt Virginia slipped a small envelope into my hand. "In case you forget why you stopped," she said. Inside, on a piece of paper, a single line was written, "Kindness with boundaries is strength." That night, standing on the threshold of the sleeping Brooke's room and watching her chest rise and fall in the soft glow of the nightlight, I realized that the silence in our house no longer felt like a punishment or a testament to defeat. It had become our shield, our protection. For the first time in many years, I was not afraid of tomorrow. I owed my peace of mind to no one but ourselves. My parents had once chosen pride. I had chosen freedom. And this choice of mine, quiet, firm, and final, turned out to be the loudest and most just revenge I could have ever exacted. If you have ever had to walk away to protect your inner world, know this: you are not alone.